Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost, to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going out to wage war against another king will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all of your possessions. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Now, doesn't that make you feel good all over? No? We've been reading Luke all through the summer, and we've noticed, and we have to take the fact that when Luke writes, he's writing 45 to 50 years after the resurrection of Jesus. And so when he recalls all of the different stories about Jesus and he plots out his gospel, he also looks upon his society as it is. He observes after the fact of Jesus' resurrection, is thinking to himself, well, what has this story done? And he looks at it very carefully, and he pulls in what he sees, and he melds it into sayings of Jesus. And it's one of those ways in which he is writing to the current people, not necessarily knowing that he might be writing for us. And he's saying, look, see what's happening. And in those conversions of original Christianity, there's all kinds of people, and it's causing all kinds of squabbles. And indeed, father is sometimes against son, mother against daughter. All of these things happen when people start changing the pattern of their lives, and they don't kind of coalesce with what they've been as a family unit. And that is a phenomenon that we can even see today. I always remember meeting this Irish lady, Catholic lady, when I was in the Friars, and she would come up, and one day she came up, and she was kind of glum. And I said, well, what's the matter today? And she said, received word for my niece in Ireland. What was it? She married an Englishman, she'll have no luck. Well, you see, it was such a radical departure what the expectation was. And so we can see this thing kind of happening. Also toward the end when you see, you can't become my disciples unless you give up your possessions. And indeed, Luke was seeing that kind of happen. We have to recall that in certain areas, originally some of these new Christians did give away everything. They lived what you might call a strict socialist life. And you'll read that in the book of Acts, which of course is also written by Luke. So we ought not to be surprised that what we're reading here is a defined history of what's going on, not only in what Jesus says, but what also Luke sees out in society when Christianity starts to move outward and more people are becoming people who follow the way as it was known then. So the real question is, what are we going to do with it? Well, these folks here aren't born Christians, but we are. And I assume most of you all are here. If you're not, I would say 99.99% of you are. So it's not as if you had a conversion experience that causes all that much chaos. I was born Christian, and it doesn't matter what denomination. So it's not as if this section of the gospel applies to us in that same manner. So you can see what's going on then. But the real problem is what's going on now. And perhaps the most critical issue that's going on here for us, who are so used to coming to church, who are so used to hearing the gospel, singing our hymns and so on, is to say to ourselves, what is so radical about this that we can apply to ourselves? And there's an awful lot of concept of sacrifice going on in this text. And indeed, everything about our Christian identity has a certain element of sacrifice to it. The fact that you're sitting here this morning says, decided. My option was I'd come to church. And so you made a decision. And doing that, you sacrificed getting up, getting dressed, getting in your car, and getting here. Well, you could call that a sacrifice, although for a lot of us it's just something we want to do. Or you could say that next Saturday, for those of you who signed up, you're going to sacrifice your whole Saturday morning, and you're going to come to do the End Hunger Now program. And you've also, many of you, sacrificed some of your money. Because we wanted $3,500, we got over $4,500. Hurrah, hurrah. Big smile on Judy Meyer's face back there. She has been our cheerleader in getting this done. But that is a form of sacrifice. So we're doing some of this stuff, but the real question is, when you get right down to it, it isn't always that easy, and it isn't always that pleasant. When I decided that I was going to go off to seminary, I was just filled with expectations. Yes, sirree, that's what I wanted to do, no doubt about it. And I had to go visit this one pastor in Connecticut who was assigned to talk to the various people who wanted to go to seminary. He had the face of Boris Karloff. Stern. Listening to all my excitement. Yeah, I want to go to seminary. And he wouldn't say anything. And then finally he looked at me and he said, well, how nice. So, what are you going to do if you get to seminary and you run out of money? Or what are you going to do if you get through seminary and you don't get a call? You got a wife, you got 2 children. Tell me what you're going to do. I didn't walk away from that meeting very happy. But the reality was it was right in my face, and he knew better than I did what was going on. Get all excited about what I want to do. Yes, sirree, God is calling me. Then all of a sudden to be brought down to ground level by this glum-faced pastor. But he was right. Because when we got in seminary, underneath us lived a family of 4, 2 kids. And after that first year, they did run out of money. So what's it all about? And maybe it's buried deep in this scripture that we almost can gloss over it. When he gives 2 examples, Jesus gives 2 examples of what this is all about. And he says, for which of you intending to build a tower does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? What's the catch? Sit down and think. How many of us all get so excited over something and we walk right in and we haven't really found out the details? It's not easy doing some of the stuff we do. It calls for sacrifice of time, of self, of money at times. And you gotta sit down. Same thing with this whole thing about going to war. What kind of a king doesn't sit down first? Looks at his 10,000 troops and they're all going, well, that side is 20,000. I think I better think it out again. Does not sit down first and calculate the cost. And that's what every church is called to do, to sit down first, calculate the cost of what we want to do. And it is not so much the hyperbole that Luke gives us this morning of hating mother, father, sister, brother. Most of us aren't going to be involved in that and living out our faith. It can happen, but certainly not in what Luke is observing in his congregation and the people that surround him at that time. So, what do we do? That's why we have councils. That's why we have committees. These people chosen, and you will choose some more people in October to say, look, you guys sit down and think about this. Think it out. Give us your best ideas, and then bring it to us, and we as a congregation will think about it. And then what we want is approval. We want to know what you are thinking and where we want us to go in life. And then we make a decision. We make a cost analysis. And then all of a sudden we say, well, okay, looks good to us. Let's go for it. So you see the text, which seems so alien at first, is really all about us this morning in so many ways. Sure, we have to kind of scrape back the historical circumstance of what was being said and to what people at what time. But the truth and the elements are there. We are called to do these type of things, to actually sit down and think it over. How many of you who ever bought a house didn't sign, especially your first house, didn't sign those mortgage papers and think, my God, what have we done? Leslie and I did that on our first house. We sat there with hands shaking. We had to sign these documents. We thought we had thought it over until that moment. We thought, my God, mortgage, principal, and taxes, $150 a month. Are we crazy? It's all relevant, isn't it? Look at these things. But that's how it felt at that moment. Now, it's interesting to note, during the Billy Graham Crusades, you always had a certain amount of people after he preached who would come forth. Ever watch Billy Graham on TV in your lifetime? All of a sudden the organ would play. And George Beverly Shea would sing. And all of these people would come up, their hearts turned, inflamed with love for Jesus. Then they did the follow-up a year later and found out only 10% followed up anyway. They didn't sit down and calculate the cost. It sounded good, and the emotional sweep pulled them away, and they thought it was just wonderful. They heard Beverly Shea singing Just As I Am, and their hearts were broken, until all of a sudden they realized they had to get up every morning and go to church. And what's worse, that church wanted money. You see, they didn't calculate the cost. And that is why Jesus said, living this life, you need to be wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove. Not an easy thing to pull off, is it? But nevertheless, it's called seeing both sides of the balance sheet, the pro, the con. Because the business that we're in here is the gospel. We, as a collective group of people, say this is important. It calls all our gathered being together and says, how are we going to do this? It's not just a matter of survival. It's a matter that is ultimate importance. Because every generation passes this on to the next one. So the critical issue, you see, is throughout this year when we sit in committee and sit in council meetings and we make our decisions, we sit and think it over. What do you want to pass on to the next generation? Because, at least for me, some of you, I'm not naming names, aren't going to be here 50 years from now. Someone's going to be taking your seat. And whoever's sitting there is going to either be the recipient of how seriously we took the gospel, or if we did not. So, kick off September. Rally Day is next Sunday. We have all kinds of things planned. We're going to celebrate the people who protect us as we remember 9/11 and what happened in New York. We want to bring forth those people who see work for our benefits, who are our servants in military, in law, in fire departments, in police, and so on and so forth. These are the people who sat down and thought it over, calculated the cost, just as so many people did in New York. You gave up their life even after they calculated that cost. How much more we, who have the gospel in our hands, to hand on to the people who are going to be sitting where you are when you're gone. Amen. Just a note on the hymn, we will sing the first 3 verses.